why don't you tell me a little bit about your transition from working with Yahoo to jumping back into like the startup world?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a moment where I realized just big companies weren't for me. Pulled into the parking garage one day in Sunnyvale, California, and by all accounts, I had the job that I thought I always wanted. I was running business development for a huge business unit, and I didn't like going to work every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. Today, my guest is Eric Grafstrom. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you, Mike. Good, great to be here.
So, why don't you tell me a little bit about your transition from working with Yahoo to jumping back into like the startup world?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a moment where I realized just big companies weren't for me. Pulled into the parking garage one day in Sunnyvale, California, and by all accounts, I had the job that I thought I always wanted. I was running business development for a huge business unit, and I didn't like going to work every day. And it was nothing to do with the company. I mean, this is when Yahoo was doing well. By all accounts, I had a pretty cool job, and I learned a ton there. I mean, it's a great company. I still have a lot of great memories and people, but I realized that I'm somebody who likes to deal with a lot of white space and likes to deal with a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty. And there's probably a bit of a disease for folks like me, which is having that risk of not knowing whether something's going to work or not. And so it was clear to me. I don't think I knew exactly what it was going to look like, but that I needed to get back into the early stage stuff and leave a company at that time that had grown into several thousand people and had policies and procedures and process and that just felt constraining to me.
Cool. Well, I mean, what kind of things have you learned? I mean, you seem to have extensive experience in Silicon Valley. So, what kind of
Yeah.
what kind of things have you learned about growing and scaling tech startups?
Well, there's a lot of things that you learn. I mean, most of these things don't work out. And so, one of the big takeaways is finding somebody who's been a part of success once or twice, especially if it's early in their career, can be a bit of a disadvantage. I mean, you need to find, you know, what doesn't work. And that's a lot of trial and error. And smart people are wrong all the time. And I guess conversely, not so smart people, are right once or twice too. So, at the end of the day, the technology really is secondary. And I'm not a technology, I'm not a software engineer, but I've been doing this despite the youthful glow of my moneymaker here, I've been doing this for close to 30 years. And technology is super interesting and empowers things. But if it doesn't really, solve a problem or create an opportunity, and that translates into something that somebody's willing to pay for, it really is just kind of academic. And so Silicon Valley has its own laws of gravity and hype that look, I've worked for plenty of solutions looking for problems, and more than once where somebody says, is this company really worth 100 million, $200 million? And you're thinking in your head like, I don't think so, right? So I think that the big takeaway for me is technology is enablement for an idea, and I'm taking this from someone else, and I don't know who to attribute to. A startup is an idea that is really trying to validate whether it has the right to exist as a business. A startup isn't a company. I mean, it is a company in terms of it may be a Delaware C Corp. It may be something that has people working for it and they're all focused on some things. But, if it doesn't work, then it's not a company. It's not a business. So you're really working with something that you're trying to turn into a business. And I think that, all too often, whether it's hype or whether it's just getting in the weeds of how it works, think that real core concept can get lost. So it's really important to put that front and center.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, your current company is called ExitGuide.
Yeah.
What made it motivated you to found that company?
This is a true story, and what I will tell you again, not I mean, look, I had tons of great experience in Silicon Valley in terms of stuff that I learned. The couple of years before I started ExitGuide, I was involved with leading a couple companies through exits, and they weren't all glamorous. So yes, some were successful exits, but more often than not, I found myself really helping companies that were in a distressed situation. So investors, venture capitalists typically would bring me in, and I was kind of an operator, cleanup guy. So I was good at assessing what the core issues were causing the business, these might have been things that had run out of capital. They had burned through tens of millions of dollars. They didn't really have things working. And, I lived through about 5 or 6 of these. And some we sold the assets and closed it down. Other ones we shut down. Some we managed to turn around and they still survive. Some were sold and are part of bigger companies. I was growing kind of tired, as I like to say, of fixing problems for millionaires. Because again, when you do this in Silicon Valley for venture-backed companies, there's generally at least some level of investment that people are willing to make to get an answer of, should I pull the plug on this completely or not? You're also in a world of wildly talented, very smart people. Like, it's a super high concentration. And so whether it was somebody on staff or outside counsel, an attorney, or the fact that you lived right in Menlo Park in Palo Alto, you could always kind of get a conversation going with somebody who had this just world-class expertise at something. And I was driving down the road one day, right on El Camino. I'll never forget, right by the Stanford campus. Story comes on the radio about baby boomers trying to exit their business who are struggling. And I thought it was just a weird thing for whatever reason. And so I started to look into it, and I really landed on the idea that, this experience I had in Silicon Valley gave me kind of an understanding of the mechanics of different ways of exiting a business, like the good, not so good, and the really bad. And I always had access to these great resources, but if you owned a, small HVAC business in Columbus, Ohio, or a coffee shop in Tacoma, Washington, those types of resources are just simply not available to you. And so, we could talk more about this as we go here, but Main Street businesses in the US account for close to 40% of our GDP, and 85% of them are owned by boomers and Gen X. So we've got this demographic issue in front of us that all these people are going to have some form of an exit over the next 15 to 20 years, really. And most of them can't access these resources that I typically had access to. So I really kind of had been focused on, how do you use technology to help people, but not make it in this impersonal experience where they can't access experts when they need it. So, LegalZoom did this probably 20 some odd years ago, where they brought the process of business formation online. It doesn't mean you never talk to a lawyer, but it means that whether you're trying to form a S corp in the state of Wyoming, or a Delaware C corp for a startup, or an LLC in Arizona, the mechanics of that are fairly standard, and then you can kind of fill in the gaps with some customization, personalization, and humans. So that's what I've been trying to strive for, is to help people with exiting their business for the really small guy.
Oh, that's excellent. Like, do you have like a particular success story where maybe you helped impact a small business owner's journey through the exit process?
It's a great question. And what I will tell you is, one, we don't help people find a buyer. It's something we may do. And the reason for that is most of these businesses are hyper local. So if you've got I'll take my example of a lymphatic massage clinic, a guy named Jim Lehman, who we helped in Jacksonville, Florida. First of all, I didn't even know about lymphatic massage. He came into our platform. He had completed this form that helps owners understand what their business could be worth. So it says, okay, your clinic, your store, your manufacturing business could be worth, let's just say, anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000, and you're wanting to do this. The buyer for that business, for Jim's business, was not going to come from 100 miles away, much less 500 to 1,000 miles away. And he had someone interested in it, but he was like a lot of our customers. He was just befuddled as to, what do I even do? So, what we were able to do is basically, we have a tool that allows people to create a way to present their business to a buyer. We call it a sell sheet. Other people in kind of the publicly traded markets, it's a prospectus, it's other things. But this is not a business with 1,000 employees. This is him plus 2 other people, and the mechanics are there. And so it was a couple of coaching sessions. People pay for those. It was what we refer to as a sell sheet. It's a couple $100. But he went from, I don't even know what to do, to giving them something that he felt confident not only presented the business, but had some logic behind what the business is worth. And he was able to get the deal done. And it was just, for me, I love helping what I refer to as real people with real businesses with real revenue, reach a conclusion, for oftentimes what is their life's work. And, it really is, it's a journey that is so much more than simply finding a buyer. It's, are you prepared for this? So many deals fall apart during due diligence, or never get out of the gate because the owner's just confused. And it's just sometimes emotionally easier to shut things down than it is to actually go through these steps.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, because you put, as a business owner, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into something, and
Yeah.
then you're trying to decide, where am I going with this in the end, but I'm wondering, what do you see as the future of small business exits? Like, how is that going to change? And like, how can platforms like Exit Guide play a role in that in the future?
Well, yeah, I think that there's a lot of buzz around right now. And people have woken up to, what they would like to refer to as boring businesses. And I think it depends on how you look at it. I mean, is a small, manufacturing company that makes certain parts for medical equipment, or brokerage firms and others, are they boring? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can find interesting if you enjoy business like I do. But when you think about this at the most macro level, these businesses account for like 35 to 40% of our GDP. And as I mentioned earlier, 85% are owned by boomers and Gen X.
Mhm.
They employ close to 30 million people in the US. This isn't a if, it's a when. These businesses need to change hand. And that means two things. One is the businesses that are worth more than, say, $5 million account for about 5 to 8% of the market. They're fine, right? For the most part. They're going to gobble up the M&A advisors, the business brokers, the attorneys, because those folks can charge, a commission or hourly rate and make good money on a transaction that's high value. But a vast majority, like close to 90+%, are really, really small. And we've got Exit Guide is part of this, where we want to educate people and help them learn. You do have options. Here's what they are. Here's how you go about preparing, and do a lot of the front end work so that by the time you get ready to consummate a transaction, it's real. If we don't, I don't know. I don't want to be Pollyannish, but like when you look at the number of people who are employed in these businesses that have 2 to 5 employees, and they generate a couple thousand, 100,000 to maybe a million to 2 to 3 million a year, is huge, right? And so I view this as a mission that like we're trying to go out and really kind of help this transition so it's successful. And not every business is going to be this wild outcome where somebody's going to sell for a huge multiple. Sometimes it's getting the business into the hands of an employee or a family member or someone else in that community that can keep it going, keep those jobs there, and keep the business as a vibrant part of a community. And it doesn't have to necessarily build wealth for everybody there, but it can provide a smooth transition, a little bit of liquidity event for an owner, and keep people employed, quite frankly. But it starts with helping people understand, like, they need to take action, and they just simply can't wait and then post this up on the internet and someone's going to come in and buy it. Like, that's just not reality, unfortunately.
So I can really feel your passion for this. Like, I can feel it coming through in this conversation. So what drives that passion for helping small business owners?
It's a good question, and it's a massive market, and that excites me. But I think for whatever reason, I feel it's an injustice. I mean, I'm not going to curse, but if you're a really small business owner who's put food on the table and your kids through school, and you got 3 or 4 employees, and you want to exit, you're kind of screwed. And I lived in this crazy world of Silicon Valley where saw companies just literally light millions, if not tens of millions of dollars on fire. And it's not as though, I mean, look, in some cases there were bad actors, but for the most part, it was just too much kind of hype and sizzle and chasing the wrong things. And when I looked at it, I thought, this is not equitable, right? Where you have people who really, like, they didn't get venture capital money. They didn't have a family that backed their business. They didn't get into these other things. They actually had to create something and work really, really hard. And it's a disservice, quite frankly. And for whatever reason, it bothers me. I don't know why. Like, it just bothers me that you just have people who, we view as kind of, this taken for granted business that's in our community, that does our dry cleaning, that, makes the sandwiches we grab at lunch, or other things that are part of our day-to-day lives. And behind those are real people. And eventually they need to do something. So, yeah, it's kind of a mission business, in something about that inequity coming from this crazy land in Silicon Valley to realizing that I could take this knowledge and experience that I built to kind of, we'll say, in some ways, automate a very lightweight M&A process, because you can't do this with just throwing more people at it. It doesn't scale. And the unit economics and all the other things that I know all about from running small technology startups, you can say, all right, look, if we can make this work, we really can make a dent in hopefully millions of people's lives.
Yeah, I've worked for a few startups during my career. And this issue that I'm about to ask you about has been an issue in every single one. So there seems to be like this balance between innovation and scalability. So how do you approach that balance when you're advising startups, especially in their early stages?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a couple of things that I've noticed. One is don't fall in love with the solution, fall in love with the problem. I know fundamentally that the process of exiting a small business is completely and totally broken. The knowledge and information in terms of what your options are, how to navigate that process, all of it is just out of touch or it's very opaque. So the problem we're trying to solve for is how do you create this experience for a business owner to kind of drop their guard, understand what they don't know, learn enough to start to move through this. So, one is, do you love the problem? You love the solution. If you're in love with how you're solving this problem, you better hope you're totally lucky. Chances are you're not going to get it right on the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth time.
Right.
So that's one. And so if you love the problem, you're willing to churn through a whole bunch of your solutions to it, then you're in good shape. The other is look, no one gives a shit if you can build something. It just doesn't matter anymore. I mean, it kind of did before, but it matters even less now. So, make sure that you're pursuing like a real business. And, if you're pursuing a real business, then, you can automate and optimize things, but you don't need to do that up front because again, chances are you're going to automate and optimize the wrong things unless you're just lucky. And look, it happens, but like, I mean, if you want to bet on luck, go to Vegas. You're going to have a hell of a lot more fun and, be much more entertaining and shorter lived experience than trying to, slug it out for a startup. So, you got to love the problem, not the solution, but you also, really, do everything manually and then apply the technology to it. This is a big challenge in my experience with people who are very technically adept is that they like to come in and they'll build something because they know how to go build it. And that's where their joy and their talents shine. But no one, it's really hard to explain to someone, I know you spent 1, 2, 3 years building this thing, no one's using it. And the reality is no one cares. It's not because you didn't work hard, it's just that no one cares. And you haven't identified or at least messaged a real need that solves a pain point or creates an opportunity for someone. And if you kind of do that, some people refer to this as design thinking. They came out of Stanford and some other things, but it's just common sense. Hey, like, I've been making these widgets by hand and eventually, I can't make them anymore without, adding more hours in the day. That's just not going to happen. How do we automate the widget making process? And so it really is thinking about, you're building a business, not a technology.
I really like what you said about being in love with the problem and not the solution, because like I come from a software developer background, and
Yeah.
I don't think I would have ever stuck it out if all I did was hang my hat on oh, look what I built. Look at this great thing.
Yeah.
Because there's literally thousands of other people who could have done the exact same thing that I
Yeah.
did. You run into issues where, you've got this software and, oh no, this isn't working now
Yeah.
because you made this change and that. And if you didn't love the problem, you'd give up and walk away from that job. Nobody wants to deal with that every day if they don't care about the problem. And I
Yeah.
think that's a big thing that software developers need to remember is you're solving problems. I mean, but it's like honestly, innovation as far as software goes is sort of few and far between these days, it seems. And so it's just I mean, no one's shocked that you can do this, that, or the other thing with your phone or anything like that. It's no longer become like this, ooh, shiny object.
Yeah.
So you have to really like the problem because you're going to be sitting there trying to solve that problem, like you said, first, second, third, fourth iteration. And even then, you're not going to sit back on your laurels, because if you do, you're going to fail. You're going to have more and more changes you're going to want to do to your software. So like with you guys, basically, if I'm getting this right, you're essentially offering a software as a service to help small business owners with an exit strategy. So how do you
Yeah.
see, based on your experience, how do you see the future landscape of SaaS? What do you see
Well,
happening?
I mean, I look, I think people are getting more and more comfortable with technology to kind of let them do things for themselves. And small businesses owners are notorious for wanting to DIY, maybe even to a fault. But look, the analogy I draw is I'm gonna make a guess that we're of similar age. In what I tell people is they'll say, well, people will never do this. I'm like, look, you just don't take up any more oxygen around me. I mean, 30 years ago, maybe longer, if you wanted to go from Chicago to LA, you called a human being on the phone and you said, I wanted a plane ticket. Will you book me a hotel? Will you get me a rental car? And by the way, do you have any restaurant recommendations? That sounds like a laughable process now. We do it on our phone, and E-Trade revolutionized, and I probably should give others credit there, but like the process of, well, look, I've got 10 grand. I want to invest in a couple different stocks. Do I really need to go to someone to help me make a decision on this? I've got all the research here. So, travel, stock brokerage, even filing your taxes, we've become more and more adept at, doing some of what I like to refer to as high volume, low complexity transactions online. And I think we'll continue to see that. We're effectively trying to do the same thing, which is we're not talking about a major merger and acquisition here. We're talking about how do you get someone to go from, I don't even know what I'm doing, to, okay, my business is probably worth $450,000. If I want to sell this to my employee, here's the information I'm going to need to gather to provide to him and her. Here's the steps that I'm going to go take. And then eventually, through these, some people get stuck, or they want reassurance, or there's a nuance that they want to get that level of expert opinion on. So I think what you're seeing is not only the people on the user side who are getting more comfortable with the DIY, but I'm finding more and more people of what I'll say my generation, Gen X people, who are very comfortable as they've realized that their career, may not be 30 years with one company, and that they made to be, a little more diversified in their talents. And those people are opening up, their wealth of knowledge and experience on a very kind of on-demand ad hoc basis, whether it's they do a little bit of coaching on the side, they move into coaching as a full-time basis. And so, SaaS is now kind of starting to be this bridge between, on-demand experts who can be literally anywhere in the world, to then say, oh, you're trying to figure out what's an appropriate multiple on a manufacturing company in the medical industry, and you're trying to figure out how to close a $300,000 gap, and should you sell, then be like, I'm actually like, I'm 800 miles away. I'm in Buffalo and you're in Las Vegas. Like I can for an hour, I can impart wisdom on you that unlocks you to move forward in this transaction. So I think, what I'm really excited about is not just the functionality of it, but also how it's allowing people from all over to connect with each other and help each other get unstuck.
Yeah, I agree. So I want you to use your imagination for a minute, okay?
Uh-oh.
So let's say that ExitGuide was a character in a superhero movie. What powers would it have, and what kind of villains or challenges would it face as it tries to help small business owners?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've never been asked that, but I like it. I there would be something to do with the power of wisdom and insight. What I believe we're doing is we have developed a functionality that kind of navigates people in a user-friendly way through these mechanics of upload this document, enter these financial information, so on and so forth. What I think we're solving, though, is, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's the villain for us. I don't know what I'm doing, and people get locked up. And the reality is you were smart enough to get this business from nothing to something. You're not an idiot. But we're combating, kind of ignorance and lack of confidence day in and day out. And so I would say, our superpowers are, giving people wisdom. I don't know, maybe through like a little Aquaman, those who used to watch it on Saturday morning back in the day, the little sonar thing that came out of his head. Definitely not Jason Momoa. This is back when the guy had the yellow hair. Anyway, but like being able to impart that wisdom into people's heads that like, you can do this, you need to do something. And then I've got a tool belt full of, a whole bunch of gizmos that allow you to kind of, move through this and build your confidence and go through it. So I don't know. I wanted to have a cooler superhero. I feel like Aquaman's so. I want to have like a Superman or Flash or something like that. But I don't think running faster is our mantra.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So that was a great
Yeah.
answer. And
Yeah.
no, I'm sure you weren't expecting that question.
No, I
That was
was
the one I
not,
thought
but
of
I
before
like
we
it.
met.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this has been a good conversation. I really appreciate everything you've had to
Yeah.
offer here. And how can people find you and connect with you if they want to?
Absolutely. So you can go to exitguide.com. You can also reach me, Eric with a C, ERIC at exitguide.com. If you do, please ask or please mention that, you were listening to the show. If you're listening to the show, making this up on the spot, but I'm happy to do a 20% off a coaching session. We sell those for $299 for an hour. If you mention the show, I'll create a code and we'll give, listeners to your podcast 20% off of a coaching session. Those are oftentimes kind of where people kind of say, okay, how do I, what are the steps I need to take? So Eric at exitguide.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Eric Grafstrom. So Grafstrom, just like Nordstrom, but Graf instead, in no major retail empire behind me. Kind of got lost out on that one too. But yeah, no, I love helping other people. I love helping small business owners. Love talking about entrepreneurship. So please do reach out.
Awesome. Well, thanks for offering the listeners, a discount on a coaching session. I think that they should definitely avail themselves of that if that's something they think they need.
Yeah,
But
please
thanks
do.
again so much for this conversation. It's been amazing.
Cool.
Really appreciate talking to you. So, everybody, thanks for listening to Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. New episodes every Wednesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time. Let's see you back here next week.